and welcome to everyone watching live and everybody watching the recording. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live series, Job Search Magic, where we are demystifying the hidden roles of the hiring game to arm you with everything you need to shine in your job search. We are giving you the wisdom, the resources, the secret intel so you land your dream job and your dream salary. I'm Shannon Bowen, CEO of Monsoon Leadership. I am a job search expert, a career advancement coach, and a salary whisperer. And I am so excited to introduce you all to Loretta Turner, who is a leadership coach and a well-being strategist. And she's going to guide us through a super important conversation today that's all about how to protect your well-being on your way out. And this is such an important conversation, not just for job seekers, but also for managers who play a pivotal role in this transition that can often cause a lot of anxiety. So I am super excited to have Loretta bringing her more than a decade of experience in nonprofit and well-being to bring her people-centered, mission-driven mindset to everything that she does. Welcome, Loretta.
Hello. Hello, Shannon. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to be here. Happy Friday to those who are live. And if you're watching the recording, hello.
Hopefully it's a Friday when
And
they're watching the recording.
I'm so thrilled that you invited me into this conversation because as this topic is really close to my heart, I made a really big career change just about a year ago. And ironically enough,
Yeah.
I was leaving my full-time job in pursuit of a career that would prioritize well-being for myself and for my community. However, although I had all of that in mind, my transition wasn't as smooth as I would have hoped it to be. And if I can be really honest, there were many moments where I felt like my being was really at risk. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful to share some of my lessons learned. And yeah, this is especially relevant for those who put their notice in and relevant for those who are managing people who are putting their notice in. I'm going to give some guidance on how everyone involved can stay grounded and how folks can prioritize what really matters to them during their transition.
I love that you're talking about both sides of the equation because I do think sometimes managers don't handle it well. They're shocked, they're upset, they take it personally. So I love that we're going to dig into all that. And I love that you always center us in well being while keeping it real.
That's exactly right.
We talk so much about the first 90 days. If you're like, okay, first 90 days of a job, you Google it, you can get a million resources. There's like nothing for the last 14 days. What do you do in those last 2 weeks? So, how do we ensure a smooth transition as we're on our way out?
There is no one size fits all approach to this process because there is a lot of different factors that go into those final weeks at work. First and foremost, not everyone commits to a 2 weeks notice. Believe it or not, I gave 8 months notice.
Oh my
And
gosh, you're so generous.
I'm in the middle of writing a blog about it. So I'll break down my reasoning one of these days. But ultimately, for me, I was a director of development at a mid-sized organization. And because I felt like my role was really critical to the organization's financial health, I just felt really determined to make sure that the organization had a solid plan in place for filling that role. Again, 8 months sounds super generous, but even with that runway, I still face a lot of challenging factors, like how to communicate with my supervisor about my intentions and my plan, how and when to communicate with my direct reports about the transition and what it means for them and have to help manage their anxiety and their
Yes.
concerns. And then also having to carve out intentional time so that I could download several years of institutional knowledge into the organization while balancing other tasks and things that needed to get done, like grants that had to get out the door. And then there were factors that honestly just completely felt out of my control, like going up against a job market where nobody was interested in the job that we posted. So then we're still trying to build these job descriptions and then update these job descriptions. And then also all the time and energy going into interviewing and then screening for good candidates. So a smooth transition starts with recognizing that there are a lot of things at play and that you need to be really open about identifying those things in advance as much as you can so you can get ahead of some of the curves. And then also plan for some things that happen unexpectedly.
And everything that you said about that transition was everything that you were doing about the organization in their transition. But what about yourself? So you're doing all this, you're putting up structure, you're helping them find the next person, all of that. But then it's what about helping yourself through that transition?
I think it's really important to sit with the organization and again, get really clear on this is what we might expect in this transition and this is how we have to plan for it. And I think once you can say that out loud, then you have to be really honest and really realistic with where you fit into that work, right? Because if you put this game plan together and you recognize that there's all of these factors that could get in the way, you might have to just put your hands in the air and say, all right, this is what it is, and this is how I can help.
And
I
you
think
are
that
queen of boundaries. And so I think that having those boundaries, because there's a little bit of guilt that happens when we put in our notice. Everybody has a little bit of guilt because, oh, you've been doing that planning for that project that you're not going to implement. So there's all this guilt that comes up. So I love about you talking about you have to set boundaries. Like you can't get everything done. You can't make everybody super comfortable and happy with your transition.
and that's why clear communication is so important because I think in my experience where people have gotten where I've gotten tripped up in other people's transition is that we all have these different assumptions about what the plan might be.
Yeah.
And the ability to set boundaries in your transition and protect your well-being and again be really clear about what you can and can't do, what you will and will not do, really has to come from a place of being on the same page of what this transition might look like. Again, knowing that things might come out of left field and you have to adjust as needed. But I think it gets to be particularly hairy and well-being is particularly at risk if we're all just winging it and one person expects that I'm going to give 150% during my transition out, while in my mind, I'm only planning on giving 50%. I think another major factor to keep in mind is to your point, yeah, there might be people who are frustrated with your transition or are just having a hard time processing or coping with the fact that you're leaving. That is ultimately another thing that isn't out of your control. And when it comes to your well being, you have to focus on what is in your control, which is, again, planning for as much as you can, knowing where you begin and end, having a personal playbook of, I think this is what it's going to take for us to do this smoothly. This is exactly what I'm willing to do in this process. And if the rest of this doesn't work for you, or if you feel a type of way that this is the plan that I'm putting forward, that's really not on you, right? What is in your control is your needs. What you can articulate is possible for you during this transition.
And that's why I love to talk about the last 14 days, not the last 10 days. Yeah, there's 10 days you're at work, but you've got to use those weekends to do your own personal reflection and healing and transition. Because so many of my clients at my dream job coaching package, they come to me, they're burnt out, beaten down, feeling devalued, trying to get the energy to feel like their best self to shine on day one of a new job, but it's tough. And so you have to use those weekends to really do that inner work that you can set aside that job and be open to a new job.
Absolutely. And that is part of the planning process. It's,
Hmm.
um, I tell folks all the time that if you're in a job that's completely burning you out, you still do have a level of accountability in that,
Yeah.
right? It is not enough to say, oh, my job sucks. Oh, my boss doesn't understand. Oh, my workload is super unreasonable. And then throw your hands in the air and give up and say, there's nothing I can do about it. Yes, to some degree, we are going to be up against individuals or cultures that maybe make our job really challenging to manage, but you don't do yourself any favors if you don't take the time to look in the mirror and say, okay, where am I getting in the way here? Where am
Yeah.
I creating some of this burnout? Where am I really allowing people to step on me or over me? And where am I not speaking up about my needs? And so, to your point about the last 14 days or whatever stretch of time that you are utilizing to transition, you've got to take a really hard look at, again, some of those buffer times around what will be a challenging time to transition and make sure that you're doing everything for yourself, making sure that you are being self accountable to keeping your head screwed on straight as you go through this transition. And again, that really just comes down to planning. If you know that you're going to give 30 days notice on, I don't know, August 1st, my recommendation, my feeling is that every weekend in August has got to be meant for downtime, recharging your battery. You don't want to be necessarily traveling on those weekends or I don't know, this is hard to navigate because sometimes we can or cannot plan too well around our exit, but if you have the luxury or you have the privilege to plan, try to leave during a time where you know that you can absolutely focus on and take care of yourself and be really selfish with your needs during your transition.
I love it. You've made a bold choice for yourself, for your spirit, for your career, for your bank account, whatever, to
Right.
transition to this new job. And you don't want to just take those old bad habits with you. We all have bad habits of how we interact with work. Our societies does not teach us how to be peaceful and healthy at work. We have to learn that on our own. And so I love your advice of taking this time to be intentional to create new habits as you step into a new job. It's not just about the perfect outfit on the first day. It's all about the good habits. How do you want to show up in that new job? Are you
Right.
really living by your values?
Right.
Are you really having work life balance, which is a loaded term, but are you feeling like you can balance work and life? And I love that taking that almost a month transition and thoughtfully going through that. I love that.
And again, I took 8 months, which is nutty now that I look back on it. But as I continue to reflect on that process, I recognize if I could go back and redo it, what I would pay more attention to is the way my mindset was shifting during the transition. And
Yeah.
actually, now that I think out loud, I remember that I kept a daily journal. And so this is another recommendation.
Oh,
Once I gave my 8 months notice, as much as I could every day, I would just keep a little digital journal on my desktop and just log how I'm feeling, log how my mind has changed, log how I sense my relationships are shifting. And to be honest, I actually haven't gone back and read it yet, so I need to.
it might be
But
too soon, but that is such a gold mine. And I hope
yeah,
everybody listening, write that down. It's such a good idea. And maybe if daily doesn't work for you, maybe weekly using a voice recorder, whatever. But we learn so much about ourselves in times of transition.
100%. And I definitely will at some point go back and listen. But I know what is in those messages is how my perspective on not only the organization I was working in changed, but also my general feeling about the work I was doing and how
Yeah.
that as I was more intentionally stepping away and building boundaries and saying no and really being able to distance myself, just having that space really gave me so much clarity around what wasn't working in my life and what wasn't working in that role. I feel as much as you can in your transition, you want to try to get off of the dance floor, which is like where you feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions and everybody wants something from you before you go. And see if you can get on the balcony. See if you can take a couple of moments to really look at this transition, look at what's going on, look at what you're learning about yourself and the way you communicate and just what's coming up for you. I think again, the biggest thing that came up for me was as I created more distance, I felt like I was more able to block some of the messages
Yeah.
that I had when I was really in it. And
Yeah.
some of those were, "Hey, Loretta, you haven't done enough work. You haven't raised enough money. Your work is never ending and you have to do more and more." And once I really mindfully started to, again, distance myself, I was able to say, "Oh, I've been operating on that for 3 years."
Wow.
But if we're
Yeah.
not, again, actively practicing that mindfulness when we're in the transition really is a gift if you can be in the process and be really mindful and do the journaling and get on the balcony and pay attention to what emerges from you as you really create some intentional space.
I love that, especially if someone is stepping into leadership or supervision for the first time. You need to have a deeper understanding of yourself before you have power over someone's livelihood. And so I love all of that. I want to just encourage everybody watching live to drop questions in the chat and Shay will send them over to us because I'm going to ask Loretta a couple more questions, but then I'm going to hand it over to the audience. So get your juicy questions going. So I want to just switch gears and talk about the manager side. This came up naturally on LinkedIn in a conversation about this upcoming live that this is really important for managers because managers can sabotage a transition
Oh,
or they
yeah.
can really facilitate it. And so I would just want to hear your advice for managers during these times.
Okay. Managers, I need you to hear one thing. What managers need to know is that more than anything, you should be wanting your people to grow.
Yes.
Hard stop. As a manager and using your language, as somebody who is responsible for someone's livelihood to some degree, you want your people to grow. And yes, we want people to get their work done. Yes, there are metrics and numbers and goals that we want to meet. All of that is true. But at the end of the day, if the people we're leading aren't growing in their work, then we're not good managers. We're failing as managers, honestly. When we can manage with that kind of integrity, with people's growth in mind, then we can accept that sometimes the best way for people to grow is to move on from the organization. And we have to honor that. We have to celebrate that. We have to let our people know, let our direct reports know that we want nothing but the best for them. And that's not to say that, you can't have big emotions around somebody leaving. Yeah, it can be anxiety inducing. It can be really stressful. It can activate all of those thoughts around, oh my God, what am I going to do without them? As your job as manager is to figure that out and not to project or to
Yeah.
sabotage that anxiety onto a person who is making a very important, but also maybe very scary life decision for themselves. And so there is really this opportunity to be in partnership with a colleague or a direct report that's leaving. It's important to encourage your direct report to be really clear about what their time looks like before they leave. And so that is where that planning really becomes critical because even if you're not the manager, if you're the direct report, it's important for you still to go to your manager and say, this is my plan. And if you are the
Yeah.
manager, you have to be all ears, right? You can absolutely work with your direct report in co creating a transition that feels like it's a win for everyone. And the truth of the matter is, not everybody's going to get exactly what they want in the process, but it's much, much better to just at least try to sit down together and say, like, all right, how can we make this a good experience overall? And again, as a manager, you can express your concerns. I remember when I left my last job, HR had specifically pulled me aside and said, can you please download all of your processes? Because it would drive me mad if we didn't capture all of the good work that you did in a meaningful way. And honestly, I was able to do that for her to the best of my ability because she asked and she expressed to me, hey, I'd be super anxious if we didn't get this done. So, as a manager, yes, you can find your voice and being able to express your needs and concerns and the needs of the organization, but know that your needs and concerns are just as important as what the departing employees' needs are, and you have to work together to, again, try to find a win, a balance, something that makes everyone feel like the transition was as painless as possible.
Really, when you step into management and you step into leadership, you want to facilitate those good transitions because you will call on your past staff to consult for you when you have these gaps in staffing. So
Yes.
it behooves you to have these strong relationships with your staff because, okay, I have a staff person leave. I know I can call on one of my former staff to consult for me for a bit because we have that strong relationship. But I think sometimes people think of it as just one time transactions, but you're building a career. You're building a network that will sustain you. And it's not just people above you. You need to be developing your network across all levels of power in your organization and in your field.
And you don't want to burn that bridge because you don't know who your like departing employees network is, right?
Yep.
If they gone from the organization, you don't know who's reaching out to them saying, hey, did you work at X, Y, and Z? How is management? I'm thinking about applying for your role. I think I would be reporting to this person. If I had a really icky transition out, or I felt like you were projecting your anxiety onto me, or I felt like you were unkind to me during my transition, I am not sending my people there.
And that
Now,
job's
what?
going to sit vacant and you're going to have the higher workload. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's not worth the outburst. There's so many decisions that go in, so many factors that go into a decision to change jobs. And sometimes they've asked for a raise internally and they were denied it. And guess what? They want to buy a house, they want to grow a family, they want to go on a vacay, they got to take care of an elderly parent, whatever.
Yes.
We have to have the money to fund our lives. I want to ask you a
Yeah.
really spicy question.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Yeah, I know you're ready. Because this is the one that comes up a lot. Should you
Okay.
do an exit interview? Do you go tell all about your toxic boss at an exit interview, or do you just go, I got to get out of here? What should people do?
I think you can tell by my face what I'm going to say. Do an exit interview. No
I
questions.
agree.
Because in my perspective, people need to know what your experience was like. And
Yep.
quick tip, my experience, some organizations don't have an exit interview process, or quite frankly, they might not be ready to hear what you have to say or don't want to hear what you have to say. So even if HR or whoever in the organization would be responsible for that process doesn't reach out to you about an interview, please reach out to them. Please say, hey, I've got just a little bit more information that I want to offload before I head out, because I think it's really important for you to know this about my experience and what I felt or experienced in this culture. You really have to offload what you learned in your experiences in hopes that someone in the organization is listening and will take that feedback seriously. And it doesn't mean you have to kick down the doors and run in there and go off your laundry list of everything that was terrible and everything that was bad. Doesn't mean you have to give all hard to hear feedback. Exit interviews are also a really great time to capture what worked well. It's a
Yes.
great opportunity to talk about what impacted your life for the better. Hey, this initiative or when we did this really made a difference in my work and in my life. Keep going with that. But of course, it's also an opportunity to say, this didn't work well for me. This made me feel small. This is what ultimately pushed me out. Management needs to hear that no
Yeah.
matter what needs to happen. And in my mind, you don't know what themes might be coming up in one exit interview to the next. And
Yeah.
sometimes something you share could be like the critical breaking point that who knows could inspire change within the organization even after you're gone.
And I would say, especially if one of the reasons you're leaving is that you're underpaid compared to market rate, you need to be telling your HR department that because that hopefully will spur on pay equity efforts, which we're going to talk about in our next LinkedIn Lives. But you have a lot of power in that moment, and you shouldn't waste that powerful moment to shape a culture because you are leaving at least one person behind that you care for at that organization. So if you can use that powerful moment to make it a better workplace for them, I think you should go for it.
And it's really your last opportunity, your last hurrah to advocate for well-being. In my exit interviews, and well-being and wellness is always top of mind. It's one of my core values. I'm always sharing, like, this is what was working in pursuit of me feeling like a whole person. This is what broke me down in the organization. And
Yeah.
again, you just hope that someone is listening intently to that because hopefully they can put that into practice.
I will say if there's any managers out here, they're like, "Oh, how do I do this?" I would totally encourage you to book a call with Loretta because she really understands how to integrate well-being into structures. And I think a lot of people don't know how to do the individual well-being and the structural element, but I think Loretta's a real expert on that. So just want to give a plug to work with Loretta because obviously I'm only bringing people on here that I love working with. And I want to just take a quick moment and say that this is a preview for a series of webinars I'm running this summer, also called Job Search Magic. And we're going to go through each stage of the job search process. So, identifying what job you really want, how to glow up your LinkedIn to attract jobs to you, how to look good on paper in your resume and cover letter, how to nail that interview, and of course, how to negotiate a top dollar salary, my favorite. So, we're going to be doing that this summer. I'm going to drop in there our wait list. So get on the wait list. You'll get $5 off either a single workshop or the whole series. And space will be limited because I'm going to go over your materials with you. So you definitely want to get on the wait list. And I know Loretta's going to have a little something she's going to drop at the end, but I want to just grab one question because time is flying. So here's a question from the audience. What are previous employers allowed to and not allowed to share with a prospective employer? How do you relay that toxic work environment in your next job, basically? And are they allowed to go back and check on you at this place, your new employer?
I see. I think there is definitely ways to frame it. I'm actually thinking in particular about when I was interviewing for a role. I remember the way somebody did it. They actually included their, what's it called? Like their annual review
Oh,
in their
wow.
notes. And they were really transparent and saying, hey, these are some of the concerns that I was experiencing in my last job. And it has a lot to do with why I'm leaving. And I just want to be really open and transparent about, what I advocate for, what I will give voice for, and what I'm concerned about in workplace culture. So I loved that. I thought that was very bold, very brave. I don't think it's necessarily something that I would do. I think the way that I tried to frame it in new places is I always talk from the place of I.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say this place was so toxic and I hated this person and this is what they did. What I like to say is I had a hard time in this culture because I felt like I couldn't succeed in these ways, or I felt barriers here, or sometimes I didn't feel totally courageous or comfortable in certain spaces. And I like that because it tells the truth about your experience without having to blame it on other folks. And honestly, nobody can question your experience. Nobody can
That's
question
right.
you and say, are you sure you felt that way? Are you sure about that? So I really like to come from a place of these are the challenges that I experience. And this is why I made a really important choice for myself to move on to a new place that hopefully doesn't present those challenges that will be in conflict with my identity or in conflict with how I define and need well being in my life.
I think that's really sage advice because, again, every city is small and you might work with that person again. And A, you'll know what their deal is, but also just how can you advocate for yourself, but also just keep it friendly. And so I love all of that. I want to just quickly share a couple of results from the LinkedIn polls this week, and then I want you to share your offer. So we asked two polls this week on LinkedIn. What is the longest you've stayed in a nonprofit job? So 42% tie between 2 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years. So people are sticking around. 15% at 10 plus years. I was shocked. And 1% less than 2 years. But when we dig deeper, what is the shortest amount you've spent at a job? 41% 1 year or less. Okay, that feels right. We've all kind of been like, oh, gotta get out. 36% 1 to 2 years. 8% 1 month. 14% 1 week or less. And I'm dying to hear those stories. So if
Wow.
one of you did the 1 week or less, please DM me on LinkedIn. I want to hear your story because I want to hear what antenna went up with the 1 week, 1 month, and even the 1 year folks. What antenna went up that you were like, this is not a good environment for me and I need to make a change? I'm just so curious. So thank you everyone for doing those polls. Our next LinkedIn Live will be on May 17th with Sally Loftus, who is a pay equity expert. And we're going to talk about that intersection of pay equity and salary negotiation. So I'm super excited. And Loretta, thank you so much. And please share your gift to our audience today.
Of course, yes. So, like we talked a little bit today in our call. Oh my goodness, I really wish we had more time. There's so much more we could talk about.
Went
But
fast.
at the core of it, boundaries play a really key role in protecting your well-being during these job transitions. And for folks that are listening to the session either live or recorded, I'm offering my Boundary Builder digital toolkit for
Ooh.
free through the end of April. So just so you know, this is a 14-day digital guide that I specifically created for social impact professionals. It will walk you through step by step how to reclaim control over your career and how to really put your well-being first at work. And it's absolutely applicable if you are on your way out of a job. If you are watching this live or watching the recording, we're going to send the link in the chat right now. You will get a 100% off discount code. Again, that is good through April 30th. What you also need to know is once you have access to the toolkit, when you scroll to the bottom, you'll see that you also get a discount on coaching sessions with me.
Ooh,
And
that's
you
exciting.
also get a complimentary 30-minute connection call, tell me everything that's going on, and we can really connect and start to dig into it. So, all that to say, check out the link, check out the code, download the Boundary Builder Toolkit. It's a wonderful 2 week process. And then when you're ready, reach out. We can absolutely stay in touch, deepen the conversation on better boundaries so that you can really protect your well being at work.
Oh, what a gold mine. That is such a great gift. Thank you. Because I think a lot of people aren't willing to talk about when they leave a job. I think it's taboo. So I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your vulnerable story, talking through these pain points that happen on our way out. But this is such a powerful moment, and we want them to have the best transition as possible. So I so appreciate this conversation with you. And I will see you all on May 17th to talk about pay equity and salary negotiation. Thanks, everybody. Bye.